So in 2015, I was very new in my position, and I went to a presentation by the Minnesota State demographer and some deed analysts. And what they were sharing was they were predicting that counties like Ottertail County were going to have significant labor loss over the next several years. Looking out to 2030, they predicted somewhere in the neighborhood of a 7% labor force reduction. And I remember thinking that in Ottertail County, if we were to lose 7% of our workforce, that was about 1,500 workers. Even in 2015, the labor market was really tight. Businesses were being creative in terms of how they were recruiting workers. They were having to work harder and harder to gain employees. There was an emphasis on the brain drain, concerns about the loss of young people after graduation to colleges and more populated areas. So it was around this same time that I went to a conference at the University of Minnesota Morris, and I heard this presenter, this rural sociologist who really changed the way I looked at things. His name was Ben Winchester, and he really reshaped, in fact, he turned everything on its head, what I thought I knew about rural migration and how to develop vibrant rural communities. When I learned more about Ben's research and what actually was happening, it became apparent that we can continue and wring our hands and worry about the fact that we have an outmigration of 18, 19, 20-year-olds, or we can focus on where do we actually have an in-migration. And Ben's research, looking at the brain gain, pointed out that we do have an in-migration of 30 to 49-year-olds. We're gaining more 30 to 49-year-olds in Ottertail County and places like it than we're losing. And so rather than sit and stew about who we are losing and who we don't have, how do we really lean into what his research already highlighted?
My name is Ben Winchester. I'm a rural sociologist with the University of Minnesota Extension Center for Community Development. And we work in and for small towns in Minnesota, helping small towns understand their community economic and social changes that have taken place over the past number of years. And so as we've worked on the research with Ottertail County over the years, we have found out that like other counties, there's been a consistent pattern of people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s wanting to move in. But Ottertail County is the first county in the nation that has done something about this. While there are people that want to move in, they're helping people do it. And they're doing it by hiring Erik Osberg as the nation's first Rural Rebound Initiative Coordinator. And his efforts have really helped to complement traditional economic development activities. Because we know that's not just about creating jobs today, it's about bringing people in. And when we bring people in, they need to do that in a welcoming way that allows people to feel as though they're a real resident and have a stake in the future of the community. Ottertail County does this, and they've capitalized not just on these welcoming atmospheres, but also on building infrastructure, whether it's broadband or especially housing. Because without these core institutions of our small towns and our rural communities, we cannot grow. And because of the efforts that Ottertail County has really gone through over the past 7 years here, they have grown. They're the first county in Minnesota that's witnessed this kind of net migration. And we are turning the corner across many of our rural places with the leadership of Ottertail County.
So in 2017, through lots and lots of partnership and through grants, we took Ben's work and we said, we're going to really lean into this. And so we received lots of grants, in fact, enough grants to develop 2 years worth of funding for a position. And we posted and hired our very first Rural Rebound Initiative Coordinator.
My job at the end of the day is to try to get people to live and work in Ottertail County, Minnesota. How we go about that, the process is really the secret sauce, if you will. I remember in our interview, like when I was interviewing for the job, I said, okay, hypothetically speaking, if I get the job, are you guys gonna hand me a manual? And it's like step 1, step 2, or are you gonna hand me a piece of paper and a pencil? And they're like, it's the piece of paper and the pencil. So it was liberating in a way, right? Like we got to start from scratch, from zero. There was no real playbook. We just had the goal of stopping the labor force shortage in Ottertail County. One of the first things I did in this position was I studied the work of Ben Winchester from the University of Minnesota Extension. He had done research and found that organically, there was a naturally occurring phenomenon of 30 to 49-year-olds moving into rural places. When we talk about the rural narrative, there's two narratives. There's the narratives that the outside world has about rural places, and then there's the narrative that we have about ourselves. There's a lot of negative self-talk in rural places. If you've never sat in a meeting and talked about what's right with your rural place. And that's it. It's really a mindset, right? Like, again, back to Ben Winchester, people want to move to rural places for what you are right now. Not what you used to be, not what you could have been. And it's just so the process is just documenting those reasons that people want to live and work there. I spend most of my time focusing on what we call the on the map strategy, which is basically a marketing strategy. If people are going to live and work here, they need to know about us. But there's a lot of people that are smarter than me that are working on the infrastructure problems, right? Or issues or challenges. So whether it be housing or childcare or broadband, that's what we call infrastructure. And then there's the employer and employee resources, making sure that our private sector or public sector employers have the resources they need to reach the people they're trying to reach. And then last but not least is welcoming communities. We could do all of those things right, but when people come to visit or move in, if they don't feel welcomed, they're not gonna stay. So one of the questions I get is, okay, Erik, that's great, but how do you write your own narrative? And my answer to that is you document all of the good things that are happening in your county. And when you live in a rural place, you kind of take them for granted, right? Like your sunrises and your sunsets and enjoying your commute to work and your neighbors, all that stuff that, when you live in a rural place, there's a lot of positives to it. And all we really have to do is document that and then share it with the world. And so we use a lot of imagery, we use a lot of video, a lot of written word too. It's basically just telling your story in a way that somebody can relate to so it doesn't feel like a commercial. In addition to Ben's research, Explore Minnesota Tourism has research and they call it the halo effect. If somebody is exposed to just tourism advertising, they're just exposed to tourism advertising, it has nothing to do with living or working there. If they're exposed to that, the respondents in that survey thought of that place as a more favorable place to live or work or start a job or whatever, right? And so then if they've been exposed to the tourism advertising and then they have visited, that perception goes even further.
So, growing up in a small town, I think I was pretty typical that I was ready to get out by the time I was done with high school. I appreciated my small town experience. I liked growing up in New York Mills, but I was kind of ready for the next big adventure. So for me, that was going to college and studying abroad, and that's when I met my husband, and then we ended up moving to Minneapolis, ended up working for Target headquarters, and that's when we had our first 2 children, and it was great. And there came a point where we realized, wow, this is kind of hard having 2 full-time working parents, having 2 kids. We knew we wanted to have more kids. And so we just started to think seriously about this idea of moving back and becoming a rural rebounder. And the thing that finally pushed us to move back was a job opportunity, but I think what preceded that was a lot of time thinking about just lifestyle. We made the leap and decided to move back and have since had 2 more kids. And really it was the best decision that we've ever made for our family, for sure. And I think that the difference really in New York Mills in Ottertail County is there are a lot of opportunities that I didn't realize in terms of live music and access to arts and cultural offerings. There's so many cute coffee shops and places to hang out and just spend time with family. But then the other piece is that the access to the outdoor activities is so easy and so readily available. It's one of the things that I really appreciate about living in a more rural area is the impact that you can have as a leader, as an individual, as a participant in so many different activities. Feels like an amazing gift, that I get to go to work every day and feel like I'm making a difference in the community and in the region, and I get to do the things that really I'm passionate about. Feels, again, like a huge gift.
Whatever successes we've had, whatever progress we've made, I don't know how much credit we can take. This has truly been a team effort. And I don't want to keep sounding like a coach, but it really has. You've got the private sector, you've got the public sector, you've got all of these communities, you've got all of these businesses, you've got all of these stakeholders, right? Like, we aren't doing this alone. Once you start beating that drum of positivity and reasons to live and work somewhere, other people start marching to that same tune. And so if there is any credit that needs to be given, it's to the region itself.